Well, hello. Catherine Langman here, back with another episode of the Productpreneur Success Podcast. And today we're going to be talking about one of the most important key behavioural traits for success. What is it? How to develop it? Because it is something that you can learn and become good at, and it won't cost you a cent. It's totally free. And I'm also going to talk a little bit about why so many of us absolutely suck at it. So do you remember a time in your life, maybe as a kid or maybe as a teenager, when you learned a big new skill? So something like mastering a musical instrument, or learning a sport like swimming or tennis, or whatever sport you might have played, or learning how to drive. So my eldest son recently got his P's, and my second son literally just got his learners today. And so we are, we're about to go through that again in my house. If you are a parent like me, do you remember watching your kids learn really big new skills when they were little, like walking or talking or reading or writing or learning how to count their numbers? There's actually one common element to all of those things, one behavioural trait that is kind of the most important ingredient to the successful attainment of all of those very different skills. So let's see if you can work it out as we go along today. I reckon many of us are able to set goals and create a plan of action to try and achieve those goals or to try and achieve those ambitions. Some of us are pretty good at, starting to take actions based on that plan. Hands up who set, a New Year's fitness resolution and, joined a gym or set up a new exercise plan or whatever. So, most of us are good at setting those goals and getting a plan of action in place and starting to move towards it. However, most of us stop after a while, sometimes a short while, sometimes a bit longer, but, most of us stop. And, it's a pretty familiar story, I think. So let me share an example. So many years ago, I'd say more than 20 years ago, I really wanted to learn how to play guitar. I had been a violinist, through growing up from when I was little to when I was an adult, and played violin to a very high level. But I didn't really love it, and I really loved, jazz and blues, really specifically on guitar. And anyway, so I bought one and I signed up to take some lessons, and I thought it would actually be fairly easy for me to master because I'd achieved such a high level of skill on the violin. And I kind of figured, it was another string instrument and surely those abilities would be totally transferable. But after a few months, from that initial kind of spur of action and inspiration, I really hadn't learnt how to play much. And lo and behold, being able to play Paganini on the violin doesn't actually transfer that well to playing jazz and blues on the guitar. It was, it just wasn't very much fun only being able to play a couple of bar chords when I really wanted to be able to play, like Carlos Santana or something like that. And, in case you're wondering where I'm at with it now, no, I can't play the guitar at all, let alone like Carlos Santana. Anyhow, more recently, we've been teaching our new puppy, Lenny, how to go to the toilet outside. We've literally only had him for about a week and a half. He's 3 months old now. And so we've been trying to teach him to go to the toilet outside rather than all over the floor inside. He's part border collie and part poodle. So he is a pretty smart dog, but he's not quite there yet. He's only 3 months, as I said. So, we don't expect him to be there yet, but he is learning quite fast, I think. Anyway, so he's not having accidents at night and he's getting all of his number twos outside already. The good thing is with him, he's quite food motivated. I think he's exactly the kind of boy to fit into my family. He already knows exactly which cupboard his food is in, and he'll literally go and sit in front of it when he's hungry or if he's wanting his treat. But the thing is, I have to be, really consistent with training him, because that kind of haphazard approach that, would be the easiest approach, or trying different tactics, trying to do different things all the time, that would just be really confusing for him and he just would not learn. And I remember when my first two kids were babies, my two sons, right from when they were born, I started teaching them the word mum. I would say mum, 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 mum to them all the time, multiple times a day, every day for months. And consequently, their first word was mum. And my second son's next words were no, more, and mine. I'm sure that's the younger siblings' practice. But, by the time my daughter was born, my hubby had cottoned on and he started saying dad, 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 dad right from birth. And that was her first word. Anyway, how about sport? You guys all know about my kids who swim a bazillion hours a week. But when my eldest son was a toddler, though, I remember taking him to learn to swim lessons, and he would literally scream the roof down every single time. He has the loudest voice. We literally tease him and call him a foghorn. And, he was just a really stubborn kid. He's still a pretty determined kid now. But, when he was little, he would literally flat out refuse to do anything in the water that the teacher wanted him to do. And he would just scream blue murder. He was perfectly safe in the water. Obviously, the teacher was in there and he was already able to, float and paddle and put his head underwater and all of that beginner stuff. But honestly, it was so embarrassingly loud. It was really tempting to just give in and give up and get him out of the water and just not persist with it. But if I'd done that, he wouldn't have learned that he actually really loves the sport. Now, of course, as you all know, he has really high ambitions, probably the highest ambitions possible for the sport of swimming, which is to go to the Olympics. And who knows if he'll actually get there one day. But when you think about a massive goal like that, even the most talented swimmer won't get there without putting in the work. And even the most talented swimmer who does the work is still working towards a really big goal that is way out in the future. And there's a huge gap between where they are now and where they want to be when they achieve that goal, which is really common for us entrepreneurs as well. So what is the common thread between all of those various endeavors? It's consistency. Now, stay with me here. I know just be consistent sounds like an incredibly boring, tedious piece of advice. So I promise I'm going to make this interesting and I'm going to give you some really tangible things that you can easily put into practice to make this more enjoyable and sustainable as well. But consistency is absolutely key to successfully achieving your ambitions, whatever your endeavor is, whether it's in business or sport or learning an instrument or teaching a child or a dog. In order to achieve the desired result, we need to be consistent with practice, be consistent with implementing the strategies, be consistent with doing the laps, just doing the work, right? We need to do these things consistently and repetitively and regularly, not once in a blue moon. And this is true for almost every other goal or outcome that you wish to achieve. Doing something consistently and not just when you feel inspired or motivated to do it is really important. I don't know, do you remember the story, The Hare and the Tortoise? I'm sure we all probably grew up with that fairy tale, or it's probably not a fairy tale, whatever they call it. Anyway, it's a story, where the hare just could not win despite having a lead on the tortoise. On the other hand, the tortoise, with his persistence and his consistency and doing his thing over and over again, carried on, gave it his best, and he won. But imagine if the tortoise stopped in the middle without finishing the race. I mean, if you use that as an analogy to so many of us now, and we are literally comparing ourselves to our competitors, often on social media, and thinking that we're just so far behind and we might as well give up now. How common is that comparisonitis, and how quickly do we let it impact us and, stop what we're doing? So what do you think helped the tortoise win the race? Making a consistent effort despite being behind for most of the way is what helped the tortoise eventually win the race. So what do I mean by consistency when it comes to business? So consistency means really focusing on the task at hand in the present moment while maintaining that long-term vision for your business, the goals that you're aiming for. And, when we do something regularly, we achieve output or results along the way. And we can use those results as feedback to help us improve as we go. So consistency, in other words, is all about repetition. It's about repeating the same actions over and over again and getting feedback from those actions. So we're not necessarily going into it expecting that those actions are going to be perfect and we're going to win every single time, but we're using it to get just the feedback from those results, from those actions, and then adjust what we're doing accordingly to help us stay on track as we work towards our goal. So simply put, it becomes a habit. And, habit is all about investing in constant efforts to make incremental progress. And in business, consistency is more important than most people think. But in a culture where we are accustomed to instant gratification, in the wanting of that, we fail to acknowledge that some things just do take time. And achieving big goals or big progress takes time. So when we don't get immediate results, we don't see the point in continuing those actions over the long run, which is where we run the risk of shiny objects syndrome and thinking that, oh, well, that didn't work, so far this week, I'm going to change tack and do something else next week. But consistency isn't about obtaining quick results. It's about maintaining the incremental progress over a period of time. As my really good friend and client, Christy Rigby from Baby Aiders Australia, she says that success comes dressed in overalls. I so love that phrase. She says that business growth comes when you build momentum, and momentum only builds when you consistently do the things that work. So take this podcast, for instance. This is episode 150, and I have recorded and released one episode every week now for 150 weeks in a row. That's nearly 3 years. And I can tell you now, if you go back to the earliest episodes, you'll notice that they're pretty rubbish compared to what I can produce now. I was nervous. I didn't really know what people would enjoy listening to. I didn't really have much of an audience at that time. Well, obviously, when I started, I had no audience. And to be honest, it's taken a good 2 years out of the almost 3 years that I've been producing this for it to actually gain serious momentum. But now we're fast approaching 60,000 downloads, and 100% of our clients and customers have listened to it before we speak to them or before they approach us. So it's really become one of the most, if not the most important marketing strategy in our business. But had I taken the results from the first few weeks or months or even the first year, I would have 100% given up on it a long time ago. So I think, we are all aware, I hope that we're all aware that maintaining consistency is a really essential behavioural trait in order to achieve success. But, I think all of us at some point or other, we struggle to be consistent in what we do. Even though the concept of staying consistent seems very simple on the surface, most people struggle with this idea in application. And I'd say probably all of us struggle at it in one area of our life or another. Some things come more easily to some of us than others, right? But, let me tell you, in regards to this podcast, there definitely have been times where I didn't particularly feel like recording a podcast episode. I mean, I love it most of the time, but sometimes, I'm really tired or I'm sick or I'm really busy with client work or family stuff is taking over more of my time. Or sometimes it's hard to come up with new topics. And to be honest, it is kind of relentless to keep producing such a really big, chunky, long-form piece of original content every single week and then getting it out there with marketing and advertising so that people like you actually listen to it or watch it. So honestly, if this had not become a part of my weekly routine, even though I actually enjoy it in the moment, if it hadn't become a habit, if it hadn't become part of my regular routine, and if I didn't have the right structures and support in place, I don't think that I would have persisted with it long enough to be enjoying the success that we do now. So why is it that us humans struggle to be consistent, even when we know it's really good for us? It's because we do what we enjoy, whereas it's really hard to be consistent with something long enough to form a habit around it if we really don't enjoy it, or if we're not good enough at it to find it enjoyable yet. Oftentimes when we're trying to master a new skill, and business is a skill that we have to learn how to master, we don't really enjoy it until we feel like we have attained a level of mastery, right? So, we're just not at that point yet. But when we do enjoy it, we do more of it. And by doing more of it, we improve and we get better results, which makes us feel really good. And because we feel really good, because we feel more successful at doing that thing, we do it more. And so it becomes this virtuous cycle. So, we kind of need to get past that initial phase of learning and gaining skill to get to that point of, mastery and therefore enjoyment, so that we can, snowball the momentum from there. Speaking of being virtuous, Let's take running as an example. Now, I don't personally particularly enjoy running. I used to do it semi-regularly as part of my, health and fitness routines. But the last time I attempted to run, I actually slipped down a small step and broke my foot. And to be honest, I was never persistent, with it for long enough to reach that kind of runner's high that people speak about. But those that do fall in love with that feeling of elation that you get when the endorphins kick in. So they do it more and they get fitter and fitter and they enjoy that endorphin release more often. And so again, it becomes that virtuous cycle. They just want to do it more often and then they get better at it and they enjoy better results, right? When we focus on our big vision and goals, whether it's the Olympics or whether it's in, a big business goal, oftentimes we're just seeing the gap between here and there. And when we focus on that gap, when we focus on that mountain that we're climbing, it can feel like we're not making progress. And the problem with entrepreneurs and with ambitious high achievers generally is that we have a nasty habit of achieving things and then immediately moving on to the next project or the next goal. Hands up if you've been like that. I know I have in the past. The goals and the vision are perpetually in the future. It's like the horizon line. It looks like a destination you can visit, but in actuality, it keeps shifting away from you as you move towards it. So this can lead to, all of us feeling constantly stressed and miserable and like we're not successful, which, is the opposite of feeling happy. Unfortunately, as I've illustrated already with the story about the runners getting better because they enjoy running and therefore they run more, success happens because you're happy. It doesn't make you happy. So we need to find ways of being happy about doing the tasks consistently, and we need to find ways of feeling happy with our progress in order to become successful. Neuroscientists know that neural pathways in our brain are strengthened into habits through repetition and practice of thinking, feeling, and acting. So we really want to be a little bit selective about what thoughts and emotions that we are thinking and feeling, which is easier said than done, I know. If we're constantly feeling stressed and miserable and unsuccessful and unhappy because we feel like the gap between our current position and achieving our goals is not getting any closer, then we're probably not going to feel happy enough about consistently working on the actions or strategies that will actually help. Are you resonating with this in some way, shape, or form, or have I managed to make you feel a little bit deflated with all of this? Don't worry, I've got something really tangible, really practical, and really easy to implement that's completely free for everybody to help you feel good and positive about your incremental progress, so that you can strengthen the right positive neural pathways, and in turn help you to master more consistency in your behavior and actions over time. So how do you do that? And the first thing that we need to be doing is, instead of looking towards our goal first we need to get good at measuring backwards. Most entrepreneurs and high achievers, they make that mistake of always and only, or at least firstly, measuring the gap from where they are to their goal, looking at that first, right? But this is a mistake because it just serves to make us feel like losers because we haven't achieved our goals yet. And it serves to make us feel like the hard work ahead is insurmountable. Now, do you remember that story of the two mountain climbers? I've told it on this podcast before. So just briefly, there's, two mountain climbers. They're, equally experienced, equally fit. They do the same training preparation for a expedition, the same preparation in terms of gear. And so they set off together to summit this mountain. I'm probably using all the wrong terminology here, so any mountaineers out there, sorry. Anyway, so they get started and they have to break for the night. They have to camp for the night as they keep going. And what happens is one of the climbers turns back at some point. He doesn't reach the top, but one does. And the difference between the two of them is that at the end of the day, the unsuccessful mountaineer would get to at the end of the day, they would stop and he would just literally look up and see how far was left to go to get to the top of the mountain. And he would just feel exhausted and he was hurting everywhere and he's, cold and wet and just feeling like, I can't do this, it's too hard. And then the other one, the one who did reach the top, was the opposite. At the end of the day, equally as tired, equally as sore, all of that. But at the end of the day, the first thing that he did was to turn around and see how far he'd come. And then, of course, look ahead at what's left to do. And yes, it's hard, but because he was feeling good about how far he'd come already and feeling positive about that, he could look towards the summit and feel like he could do it. So super, super important to make ourselves look back first. So how do you measure backwards? And it's as easy and simple as literally just reflecting on your progress compared to where you might have started with this project or towards this goal. You know, you might look at where you were last week or last month or last quarter or all of the above. If you have one of my planner books, I wish I had one on my desk right here to show you. This makes it super easy because there are reflection prompts built into the planner to help you on a weekly and monthly and quarterly basis. And the key is to do this exercise regularly so that it becomes a habit and so that you are always looking first at the positives. The wins and the lessons is what you want to be looking for. So you always look first for the positives before you look at, what you need to do next or what you need to do better in the future. And then you will be strengthening those positive neural pathways so that you're defaulting to that, happier mind, state of mind, and feel good about, and motivated to be consistent at what you're doing. And the second thing that you want to be doing is to make a practice of documenting 3 wins daily. And this is such a simple daily practice, literally pulling out your planner book or a journal and finding 3 wins or 3 things to be grateful for from the day. Sometimes this is hard, there's always going to be times in your business or life where things just don't go to plan or where outside events happen that are really hard to deal with. We all know what that's like after the last few years, right? Trust me, I've had my fair share of tough times, as just like many, if not all of you. And sometimes my 3 wins for the day might be, I enjoyed a delicious cup of coffee this morning. I had a hug with each of my kids and it wasn't raining today, so I got outside for a walk. Sometimes my win might be finding a silver lining in a product launch campaign that didn't hit targets. I remember one product launch years ago that went completely awry, and for a variety of reasons, but there was a major error that the manufacturers made in producing our design. And the silver lining might have even have just been that I learned how to improve my product tech pack for the manufacturers. Or, a different win might be that I learned that my customers don't read print magazines anymore and not to waste further money on advertising there. You can always look at these things from 2 perspectives. You can look at it to find the win find the lesson, which is a win, or you can look at it as a failure, which is not particularly beneficial for you, right? If it's a failure, you don't learn anything from it, which is a bit of a wasted experience. So finding ways to choose how to view events really helps enormously. And again, it helps you to strengthen those neural pathways to always look for the positives and the wins, which fuels our enjoyment and our motivation and our momentum moving forwards. And then after you've documented your 3 wins for the day, it's also quite helpful to think ahead and plan for the 3 wins that you want to anticipate for tomorrow. So for me, I find just doing this in the evening just kind of helps put my busy monkey mind to bed in the evening so that I can stop thinking about what I'm going to do tomorrow. And because in the past, that kind of thinking, that constant thinking would keep me awake at night, and then you don't sleep. So that's not good. So really, it's just these 2 very simple habits of measuring backwards and finding 3 wins for the day that help keep your mindset strong and your emotions positive so that you actually enjoy what you're doing more. You feel more successful because you're enjoying it more, you'll do more of it. The consistent implementation over time, which is how your momentum snowballs and you grow bigger and faster and successfully achieve your goals and ambitions. Now, of course, in terms of consistency over time, we all need to kind of get to the point in our business where we are, consistently implementing strategies. We get kind of systemized in the way that we're working, systemized in the way that we build and work with our teams or our suppliers or our contractors or whatever. There's all of that. But at the end of the day, we're only going to get to that point when we enjoy what we're doing and we find enjoyment in what we're doing, even when we feel like we don't know what we're doing, and we're learning and trying to master this skill of business over time. So what do you think? I'd really love to hear from you listeners on this particular topic. I'd love to hear from you whether you feel successful or not. I'd love to hear from you whether you spend your time mostly noticing the gap between where you are now versus your goals and ambitions, or if you feel like you're on the other side of that already. And I'd love to hear from you if you think that you'll try practicing these 2 simple strategies of measuring backwards and the 3 daily wins. Now, I'm going to, because it is, coming to the end of the year, I'm actually going to put the link for our planner book in the podcast show notes. So you'll find this podcast at katherineLangman.com/episode-150, so for 150. So I'll put the link there to the planner book there. It comes with a free marketing planning course as well. So given we're towards the end of the year, looking towards 2023, it might be time that you are wanting to get your hands on something like that. But in the meantime, if you are keen to work with a mentor with some been there, done that before experience in building a product-based brand that might help shortcut your own business growth journey, then please just reach out. You can head to katherineLangman.com/work-with-me, and you can book in for a free initial strategy session there. But now, have a fabulous rest of the day. Have a great week, and I really look forward to being with you again on the show next week. Bye for now.